Everyone, it's Dale, and today we're going to begin the discussion on writing quality leads. The lead, as we discussed in class, is incredibly important. It's the first thing that people are going to see or hear about your story, and as you'll see, it might be the last thing people see or hear about your story. So, with all due respect to our friend Ron Burgundy here, he wrote some really horrible leads. I hope you will be better than Ron when it comes to that. So let's take a look at what it takes to write a quality lead. First things first, a quality lead creates a great first impression. It's the great first line that you want in a story. This does not mean it needs to be cheesy, but there is opportunities in broadcast to be clever with leads if you are so inclined. Most importantly, you just need a good lead. You need to tell people about your story, make it interesting, make it current, and there's a good chance people are going to want to see your story from that point on. You write a horrible lead, and you're opening the door for people to go ahead and pick something else. So you want that great first impression. So again, quality leads do not run in place. They also don't overwhelm. So we're going to talk about those in more detail, but remember in 1313, you tend to overwhelm with your lead. You stuff as much information as you possibly can into it because that's the way inverted pyramid writing goes. That's just the style. But in broadcast, we don't do that. We don't overwhelm with our leads. The things that we do answer with our leads, two main questions. What is the hook? So we'll talk about the hook here in just a second. And what's going on right now. So tell me something interesting about the story and tell me something that's going on right now. If you do both of those things, you're going to have a pretty quality lead. Al Tompkins, in our book, Writing for the Heart or Aim for the Heart, he says, I believe viewers see a story lead as the invitation to stay or the temptation to leave. Could not agree with him anymore. You write a crappy lead and you are asking people to turn the channel. I've mentioned a couple times now that there are a lot of reporters who actually write their package first and then go back and try to write the lead, and then the lead becomes a summary lead at that point. It becomes more of a 1313 style lead because you didn't incorporate it into the story writing process. So that lead is incredibly important. It is either the first thing you should do or it's one of the first two or three things that you should do when you begin writing, and you have to give it the proper amount of respect and importance. So remember, I just told you we're going to be answering two questions in your leads. One is what's going on right now. There's not a whole lot to talk to you about that. It's just something current that is going on with that story. It depends on the story. It's going to change every single time. So always look out for that. What is going on right now? Sometimes it'll be multiple things that's going on right now. Then it's up to you to find the most relevant of those. The other big question that you're answering is the one on your screen. What is the hook? And so I want to talk to you for a second about the hook, because the hook answers at least one of those questions. It'll probably answer all three of those questions. What's interesting? What's important? Why do people care? Could very well be the same thing that answer all three of those questions. Some stories will have multiple hooks. And some stories will have multiple things going on right now. That's a pretty good story if you have multiple hooks and multiple things going on. If that's the case, pick the one that you think is most interesting and that will relate to the viewer the most. So your audience might come into play at that point. But you always want to look for the hook. That should be the first thing you do when you start analyzing your script information. What is the hook? Why does this story care? Or why does this story matter? Why would people care about this story? So once you get that question down, your lead's kind of going to write itself almost, because then you're starting to look, okay, now what's going on right now? I know the hook. Put those two together, and you're going to be fine when it comes to writing leads. So here's an example of a potential broadcast lead. San Marcos City Council tonight voted to raise property taxes by 10 cents per $100 of assessed land value. Factually correct, really boring, past tense. So voted. So I'm not telling you what's going on right now. I'm telling you something that happened a couple of hours ago. I'm also using language that doesn't quite make sense. 10 cents per $100 of assessed value. What does that mean? I don't know. So we have that, but it's still factually correct. It's just not very good. It's not a good conversational broadcast lead. So what if I change it to this? Your property taxes are going up about $600 average, actually. So what we've done here is we've taken a past tense thing saying that the council voted to raise property taxes. We turned that and made it a current thing that's going on. Your property taxes are going up. And then I went and did that 10 cents per $100 of assessed land value and did the average per home. And so therefore I gave a number that people can actually relate to. A lot simpler, easier to read, and it relates more to the viewer than saying 10 cents per $100 of assessed land value. So we've talked about news qualities. We've talked about why people watch the news, but we haven't quite talked about what motivates people watching to watch the news. Al Tompkins in the book has a couple of things that he thinks motivate people to watch the news. Number one is money. So they care about consumer type stories, any type of story that involves their money. So that could be property taxes. It could be, public officials being held accountable, stuff like that. Those are all related to money. So he thinks that is the biggest motivator to get people to watch the news. Two is family. So these family and safety go very much hand in hand, I think. Safety could be a number of things. It could be crib recalls. It could be too many traffic accidents happening on one street. It could be speeding concerns downtown, crime being the biggest probably motivator of safety. Health, another big reason, and then community. People want a sense of belonging to a community, and watching TV news oftentimes makes them feel that way. I think some of those are pretty spot on. I disagree with a few of them, but who's to say who is right? We could both be right. We could both be wrong. I don't know. But here are my 5 biggest motivators. The biggest one I think is people watch TV news when there are big stories going on. So, for instance, the past couple of weeks we've had the Wimberley floods. I think people watch the news at night because they want to get the absolute latest on that. And we're more inclined to watch TV, or we're more inclined to watch TV news when there is something huge that is developing over a series of days or a series of weeks. The second biggest thing I think people watch the news for is weather, especially breaking weather. So again, the flooding stories. TV still really has a stranglehold in terms of weather coverage, breaking weather coverage in particular. So those are my 2 biggest things. And then I do agree with Al Tompkins that safety, money, and community are big motivators to get people to watch the news. So again, I'm not saying I'm right and he's wrong. I'm just saying all these things go together, and somewhere here in the middle of all this probably is why people are watching the news. So when you combine these motivating factors and the news qualities that we've already learned, you get a sense of what types of stories you should be looking for and how you should frame your stories. So again, let's take that last broadcast lead that I wrote. Your property taxes are going up about $600 actually. Now, which of these motivators does that one or apply to that lead? So money, not really community, but money is the big one. So right now, that is a money-focused lead. I'm working my way down a money-focused story. But what if I change the lead to this? There will soon be 200 new police officers on the streets thanks to a property tax hike City Council approved tonight. So now what is the focus of that story? So now if you go back to this, we've got safety and money, possibly even community, depending on how the story is written, and possibly even family. If you find a family that is concerned about the safety of their neighborhood, you're mixing and mingling all these motivating factors. So how you write your lead predicts the tone or sends you in the right direction for the tone of your story. So it's incredibly important. I've said the words incredibly important like 10 times already. That should tell you how incredibly important it is. So again, keep those motivating factors in the back of your head. Now, both of these are the same exact story. It just depends on which angle you're going to take. And that's up to you. It's up to your news judgment. It could be up to your management telling you we want it to be this certain way. It also could be to the facts that turn out to be most interesting or the most interesting sound you have. So there are a lot of different things that depend on all this. Okay, so a couple of do's and don'ts. I mentioned don't run in place. So we call this we call that being Fred Flintstone. If you remember how Fred used to get around in his car, he had to sit there and run in place for a while and get his feet going. We don't want to do that with leads. So this is, you hear this all the time, especially on the national news. In the news tonight, or we start tonight with developing news on a big story. That's all stuff that just absolutely wastes time. We're not going to be covering stories like that in this class, and you won't for Bobcat Update either, so just don't use that kind of language. That's where our friend Ron Burgundy comes into play with this. Just get to the news. Again, tonight on the Channel 4 News from Ron, just get to the story. We also want to avoid if-you leads. So you see these all the time on the news too. I just had to stop and laugh because you literally see these all the time. Leads like, if you have children, you need to listen to this. Or if you've lived in San Marcos a while, you'll appreciate this story. Well, what's the problem with that? If we wrote those for Bobcat Update, if you have children, you need to listen to this. 98% of the audience at Texas State does not have children. And then if your lead is, if you've lived in San Marcos a while, you'll appreciate this story. The vast majority of your audience has not lived in San Marcos for a while. So again, you're giving people a golden ticket to just tune out of your story or potentially change the channel. So don't use if-you leads. Find a way to rewrite those in order to get rid of that scenario. Again, focus on the hook. The hook is what's interesting. The hook is why people care. Don't use continues. This is a tempting thing to do when you're trying to come up with a what's going on right now angle on the story. And we tend to see it a lot in court cases because once you cover the same court case for 2 straight weeks, it's like, all right, I'm done. Like, I don't know what else to say about this story. So I'm just mailing in my lead tonight and say the jury continues to deliberate tonight, because there's nothing else going on and I'm spent. But instead of that, you might be able to walk around the courthouse and get a sense of how people are feeling about what the jury's doing. And you might get some good information, like people outside the courthouse are asking each other, what's taking the jury so long? So that's reporting. That's going out and observing, figuring out what people are saying, reactions to stuff that's going on, as opposed to just writing a boring continues lead. Again, you're not going to have to worry about that much in this class. I mean, especially because we're not going to be covering any continuing coverage type stories. Just keep that in mind as you move on to your first job. Again, it's all about finding something new and something interesting. And then one more thing. A quality lead is in your head. It is not in your notes. What I mean by this is one of the biggest things I see students do when they go out and work on their first stories. So they go out, they take all these notes out in the field, they come back, they transcribe all their sound bites, and they're just sitting there and they're just staring at their notes. That lead is not going to come out from your notes. You'll see in the following videos about how to write a story. As you get better at this, you'll start to have a sense of what your lead's going to be before you even come back to start transcribing your sound, because you're already going to be writing in your head as you move on. So don't sit there and waste an hour just staring at your notes. Do something productive in that time. Chunk up the information, do something, go through your sound, figure out, maybe write a couple things of what is the hook, what's going on right now, write those down. Rather than just sitting there and staring at your notes, waiting for that lead to come to you, it's not going to happen. So you have to go be proactive and make it work and make it come to you. So those are a few tips about writing leads. Watch the next couple of videos about how to put a story together, and you'll see me go through the lead writing process in that case.